All right, Shabbos, say good morning. We'll get a little bit of a 2-minute head start on the daf this morning. A lot to do today. Want to begin by thanking our sponsors, to thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Adar, to thank Paul and Kathy Pollack for dedicating all of the shiurim and drashos this month in memory of Paul's grandparents, Dina Bas Pesach and Zechariah ben Zechariah, whose yahrzeit are in the month of Adar. To thank our Week of Learning sponsors, Karen and Akiva Andrews, for dedicating the Week of Learning for the yahrzeit of Karen's mother, Marsha Bas David V'chana. To thank our Day of Learning sponsors, Eli and Joel Rashkovsky, in commemoration of the yahrzeit of Joel's grandmother, Sarah Bas Shlomo. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, the Neshamas will have an aliyah, and the families ein nechama. And also with that, let us begin. Baruch Hashem, a very exciting daf ahead of us today, both in halacha and hashkafa. So today's daf is Peiches 88. We are picking up Emiras Hashem on Pei Zayin with Beis 87b. Really a lot to do today, and we are picking up. Right, 4 lines up from before it gets wide, right? I'm Rabbi Yochanan. Thank you. So we'll say, in the intermediate wide lines, 4 lines up before the widest wide lines, I'm Rabbi Yochanan. Why was Yeravam ben Yoash, who was a Rasha, why was he counted amongst the kings of Yehuda? Because he did not go ahead and accept Lashon Hara about the Navi Amos. From where do we see that he was counted amongst the kings of Yehuda? Dvar Hashem asher haya el Hoshea ben Be'eri b'mei Uzziah Yosam achaz Yechizkiah melech Yehuda u'b'mei Yeravam ben Yoash melech Yisrael. So you see that Yeravam is counted amongst the kings of Yehuda. How do we know that that Yeravam was not Mekabel Lashon Hara? D'chsiv vayishlach Amatzia kohen beis el Yeravam melech Yisrael lemor. Amatzia sent a message to Yeravam, the king of Israel, saying the following: Kasher alecha uksiv ki ko amar Amos b'cherev yamos Yeravam. Because ultimately Amatzia sent a message that Amos prophesied that Yeravam was going to die. Amar chas v'shalom Amar osa tzadika. Chas v'shalom, did Amos actually say this? V'im Amar, and if Amos did say it, so what could I do? Shechina amralo, because after all, again, this message must have come from the Shechina. Good. So I'll say, see over here something really incredible, which is that even though Yeravam unfortunately wasn't the best person, but Lamais, again, because he refused to be Makabel Lashon Hara, because he refused to accept Lashon Hara about someone else, so ultimately, again, that was a schus for him. A very powerful idea about the power of Lashon Hara as well. Rabbi Elazar says, even when HaKadosh Baruch Hu is angry, his compassion never wanes. In other words, the Rebbe Shalom's compassion, his midas harachamim, is present even in the midst of his anger. Shnei Amar, Kilo Osif Od Arachim Es Beis Yisrael, Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Chanina or Mehacha, Kinasa Esalahem. So also the idea being that you see that even when HaKadosh Baruch Hu mentions anger, there's still a mention of compassion in the pasuk as well. So from here the Gemara says you see that even when the Ribono Shel Olam is angry, his midas harachamim is still in existence. Just a display of how much HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves. It was no different than a parent. Even when a parent gets angry with the child, so parental love never fully dissipates. The parental love is always there. It might be, maybe it's not totally detectable in a moment of anger, but lamaisa, it's there. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even when he gets angry at us, at the end of the day, that love is always present. This is incredible. This is an incredible Gemara. Why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu exile us? Why did he exile us? I'll say only in order that we could pick up converts. So we'll say, listen to this wild Gemara. So the Gemara says, essentially, if we were never exiled, we would remain in Eretz Yisrael. If we would remain in Eretz Yisrael, so the impact and influence of Am Yisrael upon the Umos, upon the nations of the world would be limited. So what did HaKadosh Baruch Hu do? He exiled us. Therefore, by exiling us, our influence is felt all over the world, and as a result, we pick up gerim, we pick up converts. Now the Gemara says, "Shene'emar v'zarati li ba'aretz klum adam zoreh." Sorry, V'zarati li ba'aretz. So Hakadosh Baruch Hu says, I will plant you in the earth. Klum adam zoreah sa'ah. So when a person plants seeds, let's say a person plants seeds for what purpose? For the purpose of harvesting a crop. So too when HaKadosh Baruch Hu went ahead and planted seeds, right, he planted Klal Yisrael. Planting Klal Yisrael is a nice way of saying he exiled us all over the place, so he planted us. And the goal of planting us ultimately again was to reap a harvest through the Geirim, through the converts who ultimately would join Klal Yisrael. The Gemara says, Rabbi Yochanan mehacha v'rechamti eis lo ruchama. So also I want to point out, this is really a fascinating Gemara because not in general, we are not a proselytizing religion, right? Remember again, we're actually, the ger shows up, the Gentile shows up, wants to convert. The first thing we tell them when they enter into the Beis Din is, what's the matter with you? Right? Get out of here. You could be a righteous Gentile. The Jews have not cornered the market on God. You could be a righteous Gentile and all you need is 7 mitzvahs. You can have a lichtika Gan Eden. You can have a beautiful life, beautiful afterlife. You don't need to do this. We're not a proselytizing religion. So what does this mean when the Gemara says Hakadosh Baruch Hu only exiled us in order to go ahead and bring Gerim? So Levi Yitzchak Berdichev has a beautiful insight into this very quickly. And the Rebbe says like this. He says, when Hakadosh Baruch Hu created the world, there are nitzotzos, there are sparks of holiness everywhere. Everywhere. But what ends up happening over time is those sparks become obscured, become covered over by what's called klipos, shells. And the job of the Jew is to remove the klipos, to remove the shells, or the coverings, and to expose the nitzotzos hakidusha, to expose the sparks of holiness. So wherever a Jew goes somewhere and does a davar shebekdusha, does something holy, by definition, what he does is he's megala the nitzotzos. He exposes the sparks in that place. So that's like, you ever have a situation like this where you're traveling somewhere, where let's say again, there's no Jewish infrastructure, and you daven there. And sometimes you have like the most meaningful and beautiful davening, and it's a little bit counterintuitive because you say to yourself, how come I don't daven like this when I'm home in shul? Right? How come when I have all the trappings of Jewish infrastructure, I don't daven like this? And here I'm in the middle of nowhere, maybe I'm in nature, I have such a beautiful and uplifting davening. So on a deeper ruchni level, that's because very often it's possible that maybe you're the first person to daven in this place. And maybe it's never happened that a Jew has set foot in this place. So if you're davening a shachris, a mincha, a ma'ariv, saying a bracha in a place that never had spiritual activity occur in it, what you are feeling is the gilui hanitzotzos. What you've done is you've revealed the hidden sparks that are in that place. And that's what your neshama is feeling. That's that feeling of elation. So when the Gemara says that Hakadosh Baruch Hu exiled us only to find Gerim, remember, it doesn't mean we're spread all over the place to proselytize people. That's not our way. That's not our belief. What's the idea of the ger? The idea of the ger is the ger. Ultimately, every person who converts is a neshama who is pledged at Har Sinai. There's a nitzutz. There's a spark that's there, and the spark is often covered. So we are spread throughout the galus in order ultimately again to be megala the nitzotzos, to uncover the sparks and to elevate them. This is why I believe Yitzchak Berdichev says, when does Mashiach come? When does Mashiach come? Mashiach comes when we're megala the nitzotzos. It's very interesting. He says we have a job. We have a job in galus. Our job, it's not just the pshat that we're here and we're waiting. You know, in Judaism, we have to really get back to that. But you know, in Yiddishkeit, I just want to point out, we don't believe in passivity. So it's not like we're just sitting here waiting for Mashiach. There's a job to be done. And the job is to be megala the nitzotzos. There are pockets of kedusha in every single place where we are exiled. And when do we go home? When does Mashiach come? Mashiach comes when we have been megala the nitzotzos. When the job is done, that's when Geula comes. It's incredibly important because often what the Gemara is saying is we look at diaspora as like a punishment, and therefore we're passive. We've been punished. We've been exiled, and now we have to wait to be brought home. We don't wait. First of all, we don't have to wait to be brought home. We can go home now if we want to. That's Aleph. And Beis is, we're not sitting around waiting. There's work to be done as we wait for the Geula. So the Gemara goes on. My dichsev, al tal shein evet el adonov, Pen yikalcha v'ashamta. So what does it mean when it says, do not go ahead and slander a servant to his master, lest he curse you and you will be culpable. Uksiv, dor aviv yikalo ves imo lo yivorach. So the pasuk says, a generation who will curse his father and his mother he will not bless. What does that mean? Mishum the aviv yikalo ves imo lo yivorach al talshin. What does it mean? Because he curses his father doesn't bless his mother, you shouldn't slander him. What does this mean? Ela afilu darsha aviv yikalo ves imo lo yivorach al talshin even al eladonov. We'll say, listen to this. What it means is, we'll say this is so incredibly important. When you see a generation of Jews who are cursing their father and not blessing their mother, Jews behaving inappropriately, al talshin el adonov, don't speak negatively about Klal Yisrael. Say, don't speak negatively about the Jewish people. Where do we know this from? Minalan Hosea. We saw this in yesterday's daf, right? Hosea spoke negatively. And remember, even Hosea didn't speak so negatively. Hosea was kind of just going along with the flow, with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Kadosh Baruch Hu said, I'm really unhappy with his people, right? I don't know what I should do. And Hosea just says, okay, just swap him out. So you see, Hosea was taken to task for speaking negative. We'll say how careful we have to be about how we speak about our own nation. And this is not always easy, because sometimes we see segments or sects or parts of Klal Yisrael doing really inappropriate things. And there's a way, of course, sometimes you have to be a voice, and you have to, if you see something wrong happening, you have to go ahead and speak up. But at the end of the day, there's a way to talk about your nation. There's a way to talk about Am Yisrael, and one must be careful. Tzidkas was one of Yisrael. Tzedakah asar HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'Yisrael. Ribbon Shalom went ahead and did. So we'll say, see here, literally, it's Gemara quoting over here the pasuk from Shoftim. Tzidkos Pizrono b'Yisrael. So we'll say the Gemara is darshaning over here that Tzedakah asar HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yisrael pazon bein umos. The Ribbon Shalom did us tzedakah. He went ahead and he did us a tova. He did a good thing. He was charitable to us. That he scattered us amongst the nations. So let's listen to this. So we'll say, what does it mean? Meaning, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu exiled us, he could have exiled all of Am Yisrael, to Lakewood, right? It could have been, right, all, right? I don't know, for some maybe that's not even a gullus, right? So I'll say, so meaning he could have gone ahead and sent all of Klal Yisrael to one place. But he doesn't do that. Instead, what he did is, he scattered us. The Gemara says that was a tzedakah. That was a charitable act. Why? Listen to this. Well, this is incredible. There was a particular apikoris, who said to Rabbi Chanina, Anan ma'alinan minaycha. We are better than you. Now, this min was counting himself as a guy. So he said, we guy, and we're better than you. Ksiv b'chu, because by you it says, ki sheishes chadashim yashav sham. So also over here, the pasuk in Malachim speaks about again Yoav, right, one of the generals of David HaMelech. So pretty much destroyed a lot of Edom, every man in Edom, in 6 months. So when Klal Yisrael occupies another nation, we destroy them. However, v'ilu anan isnuchu gabon kamashani v'lo kavdinu lechumidi. And this min says, Rabbi Chanina, you see, you people, you Jews, you're amongst us, you've been amongst us for many years, and we haven't destroyed you. So we're better than you. You go ahead and have Gentile nations live amongst you, you destroy them. But yet, you Jews, you live amongst us, we haven't destroyed you, we're better than you. So also listen to this. Amar lo ritzoncha itapalucha talmid echad, netapalu Rabbi Oshia. So Rabbi Oshia says to him, Rabbi Chanina says to me, let me send one of my Talmidim, Rabbi Oshia, to debate this point with you. So Rabbi Oshia says to this min, you think you're so great. The only reason you haven't destroyed us, the Jews who live amongst you, is because you don't know what to do with us. The Gemara says, if you try to destroy us all, well, you can't, because all of Am Yisrael is not scattered. We don't all live together. We all live in one place. If you destroy the Jews who live amongst you, they will call you ultimately a cut-off kingdom, because you've destroyed a part of your population. So essentially, Moshe says to this min, don't toot your horn of personal piety. You're not pious because you haven't destroyed us. You just don't know how to properly destroy us. You can't kill all of us because we're scattered everywhere. You also can't go ahead and kill out the Jews amongst you because then that'll cause like a bald spot in your kingdom. So Amarle Gapa de Ramai said this min, right? This Apikari said to Rav Oshia, Gapa de Ramai, which literally means again by the wall of Rome. This is like a lashon of Shvua. Baha nachtinan lehasakinan. We have this discussion amongst us every single day, right? What's the discussion? How do we deal with the Jewish problem? And this is exactly the conversation that we have. So we'll say it's a pretty amazing and overwhelming Gemara. But amazingly enough, what you see from this Gemara is that the chesed of the Ribono Shel Olam is manifest in the fact that he did not exile all of us to one place, that he scattered us. The scattering, apparently, again, is part of the reason we are still here today, because throughout ages of persecution, no one was ever able to fully eradicate Am Yisrael because we were never centrally located in one area. It's pretty incredible, pretty overwhelming Gemara. Good. Gemara goes right to Turn Bechia. My Dichsiv. Elokim Haven is Darka. V'hu Yada Es Mekoma. What is it? Chashon Baruch Hu understood the way and he understood the place. Yodea Kadosh Baruch Hu Es Yisrael She'enon Yecholim Lekabel Gziras Achzarias Edom. The Rosh Hashanah knew when he exiled us after the Churban Beis Hamikdash that we would be unable to live in under the cruel decrees of Edom. Right? So we'll say Edom is Esav. So Chashon Baruch Hu knew we would not be able to live under Edom. Lefichach Higla Osam LeBavel. Therefore, Kadosh Baruch Hu exiled us to Bavel. So you begin to see divine compassion even in Galus. Furthermore, again, I will say Bavel is generally referred to as like the valley. Kadosh Baruch Hu exiled us to Bavel. Why? Because it's as deep as the grave. Shene'emar miyad sha'ol efdeim mimaves agaleim. Rabbi Chanina Amar Deisha Karov Lashon Lashon Torah. Kadosh Baruch Hu exiled us to Bavel. Why? Because the Babylonian dialect, the language, is similar to Lashon HaKodesh, to Hebrew. Therefore, again, exile would not be as overwhelming because there was some level of cultural familiarity. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Mipnei Shigra on the base Iman. This is incredible. Why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu exile us to Babel? Because it was like being sent home. Because also remember again, where does Avram Avinu emerge from? Avram Avinu emerges from the Babylonian Empire, the Babylonian area. What became Babel? Aram Naraim ultimately is Avram Avinu. Amazing HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when he got angry at us, almost sent us back to our parents' home. Mashallah Adam Shakar Sal Ishto. This could be comparable to a man who gets angry at his wife. Lehechan Mishagron. Where does he send her? And I will say the answer usually is nowhere, right? But at least from the Gemara's perspective, Leichan Meshagran, so where does he send her? Lebeis Ima, back to her mother's home. So to Kiviyachar, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gets angry with us. Where did he send us? He sent us back to our mother's home, which in this particular case was back to Babel. There are three things that returned to their source. I'm sorry, I said Ram Naraim. Really, or Kastim, Rashi points out for Avram Avinu. Three things that return to their source. Both say, what are the three things? Elohein, Yisrael, Am Yisrael. We return to our source. Our source, Avram Avinu, was from Ur Kasdim, Babel. So we were exiled back to Babel. Which I will say, if you think about it, by the way, is such an amazing thing. So it turns out, listen to what the Gemara is saying. It turns out that the way to look at Galus to a certain degree, and it sounds a little bit counterintuitive, is a return to the source. Life is a series of concentric circles. So we often look at Bavel as a removal from the source. Right? Galus is a removal from the source. But in fact, the Gemara is saying it's not true. Galus, to a certain degree, at least Galus Bavel, was a return to the source. Obviously, again, then the goal was to get back, but yet, coming to Avram Avinu, here's the irony. Not irony, but the amazing. For Avram Avinu coming back to Eretz Canaan, that was coming back to the source. Because remember, Adam HaRishon comes from the earth of Harabayis. So man comes from Eretz Yisrael. So Avram Avinu comes back to Eretz Yisrael. The children go back to Bavel. It's just a series of these circles. We're constantly in some type of circuit. The only shaila is, the diameter of the circle. The only shaila is how far it takes to come back to the source. It's really incredible. So Am Yisrael, we go back to our source. Kesef Mitzrayim, Ksav Luchos. Ksav Luchos. So we'll say the three things are, I'm going to read it normally. Am Yisrael went back to the source. Kesef Mitzrayim, the wealth of Egypt, went back to its source. Ksav Luchos, the writing of the Luchos, went back to its source. What does this mean? Yisrael had the Amran, so we'll say Klal Yisrael. That's what we just said before, right? That Galus Bavel was a return to the source. Kesef Mitzrayim Dichsiv, Vahi B'Shana Chamishas L'Malach Rechavam, Allah Shishak Melech Mitzrayim Al Yerushalayim. So we'll say, amazingly enough, during the days of Rechavam, remember Rechavam was the son of Shlomo HaMelech. So during the days of Rechavam, Shishak, the king of Egypt, marched on Eretz Yisrael, and in order to prevent him from invading, they paid him off. So they gave him all the money in the treasury. So we'll say, remember, so pretty much all the money that Klal Yisrael took from Egypt, which became part of collective Jewish wealth, was given back to Egypt. Isn't that incredible? And next, Vahaluchos. And Ksav Luchos. Tichsev Vashabrem Leinechem, Tana Luchos Nishbru Vaosios Polchos. We'll say such a beautiful Gemara. That when Moshe Rabbeinu broke the Luchos, what happens? The tablets themselves were smashed. But the letters ultimately again ascended back to the heavens. So the writing of the Luchos, so Klal Yisrael went back to its source, the money of Mitzrayim went back to its source, and the writing of the Luchos went back to its source. A lot to say on this, but no time. So the Gemara says, Ula says, why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu exile us to Bavel? Listen to this. Kedei sheyochlu tmar on top of peiches v'yasku b'Torah. In order that we should eat dates and be osek in Torah. So listen to this. Dates are in abundance in Bavel. Dates are also cheap, as we'll see, and they satiate. So Ula said the incredible thing about Bavel is you don't really need that much money to lead a pretty comfortable life, which means that you don't have to work so hard and you have more time to learn. Ula ikla lepumpadisa. So Ula went once to Pumpadisa. Krevule tirine ditmari. They brought him a basket of dates. Amrlahu kamo kihani bezuza. How many of these dates can you buy for a zuz? Amrle tlas bezuza. They said to him 3 for a zuz. Now we'll say now whether they meant 3 dates for a zuz, 3 baskets for a zuz. Okay, it's a discussion. Not really material for our purpose. The point over here is dates are cheap in Bavel. Amar Malit Sana the Dovsha Bezuza Ubavloilo Asko Baraisa. So Ula said, how could it be? Literally, you could get a basket of honey, which is a reference to the dates, for 1 zuz. In other words, you could sustain yourself for such a small amount of money. And how is it that the Babylonians don't learn Torah all day? So Ula was surprised. It takes so little to live, to exist in Bavel, which is great for Torah because you have so much more time for learning. So we'll say what happened. Balayla Tsaru. That night, Ula had terrible stomach issues as a result of the dates. So although they were cheap, they apparently again have a stomach effect. So what happens? Amar Malit Sana Tsama de Musa Bezuza, right? Bebavel, Ubavloy Aske. So that night he said, a basket of death only costs a zuz. And now, again, I can't believe the Babylonians learn Torah. So we'll say what he said is, these dates which are cheap are really very difficult, and the Babylonians have to subsist on this, and yet they're still able to learn. So he went, interestingly enough, let's say such a musar, that sometimes, you think you have things figured out, but you really don't know what you're talking about. Right? So Ula thinks he's giving most of the Babylonians, you could get so much food for such little money, how can you not learn Torah the whole day? And then he realizes the food supply is not so pashut. So suddenly again he stands in awe of the Babylonians that they're able to learn, despite the fact that they have to contend with these gastrointestinal issues. I'll say pretty incredible musar about being careful to pass judgment before you really have the full picture of things. My dichsiv v'halchu amim rabim v'amruluchu v'nalel har Hashem el beis Elokei Yaakov. So we'll say, what's the meaning of this pasuk in Yeshaya, which refers also ultimately again to messianic redemption, third Beis Hamikdash, where the pasuk says, and the nations, many nations will come and they will say, let us go up, let us ascend to the mountain of God, to the house of the God of Yaakov. Elokei Yaakov Elokei Avram Yitzchak Yaakov. Why is Bayis Shlishi? Listen to how beautiful this is. Why is Bayis Shlishi ultimately referred to as the house of Yaakov, and not the house of Avram and Yitzchak? Listen to how beautiful this is. Elalo Kavram Shekasa Bolhar. Avram Avinu called Harabayis, right, the Beis Hamikdash, a mountain. Shnei Amar, Asher Yamer Hayom Bahar Hashem Yira'eh. Veloki Yitzchak Shekasa Bosada. and not like Yitzchak, who called the Har HaBayis Beis HaMikdash a field. Shneimar, Vayetze Yitzchak lasuach basodeh. Yitzchak went out into the field. Elek Yaakov shekara bayis. Yaakov called the Beis Hamikdash a home. Shneimar, Vayikra Shem Hamakam Ahu Beis El. Yaakov called the place the house of God. So we'll say there's a lot to say in this Gemara. So you'll take a look at the Maharsha. The Maharsha discusses that it could very well be that that Avraham Avinu's reference to Har HaBayis as a har, or the Beis Hamikdash as a har, and Yitzchak as a sod and Yaakov as a bayis may actually refer to different qualities of the Bayis Rishon, Shini, and Shlishi. Rabbi say what the Gemara is highlighting is a very simple yisod. A har is awesome, but a har, lav dafka, is fit for habitation, right? A har also might not be able to accommodate a lot of people. A sadeh is very nice. It could yield something beautiful, but maybe it doesn't yield anything. But a bayis represents a sense of security. A bayis is a domicile. A bayis is a place of nurturing. And Yaakov Avinu understood that the power of the Beis Hamikdash was not that it stands above, and not that it yields some type of produce, but at the end of the day that it provides a home in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Klal Yisrael could come together. That was the power of Yaakov Avinu's allusion to Beis Hamikdash as a bayis, and that's why the Bayis Shlishi is known as the Beis Yaakov, as the Beis Elokei Yaakov. Rabbi Yochanan, Gadol Kibbutz Galios Kiyom Shenivru Bo Shemaim Va'aretz. The day when Mashiach comes in this Kibbutz Galios, the ingathering of the exiles, is as great as the day that Hashem created the world. Shneimar v'nikbetzu b'nei Yehuda b'nei Yisrael yachtov v'samu lahem rosh echad va'alu min ha'aretz ki gadol yom Yisrael uksiv v'yera v'yivoker yom echad. So we'll say it's the Gzer Shav of Yom Yom. It says Yom by creation, it says Yom by Kibbutz Galios. Just like, so therefore Kibbutz Galios, the ingathering of exiles by Mashiach, is as great as the day, ultimately, of the creation of the world. We'll say, incredible and exceptional Gemara. I strongly urge you, fold down the page on these type of datim of Gemara. Go back and look at it, because again, I don't do it justice at all. I have to ask you, Mechila, because mamish, this is like stumbling upon buried treasure, opening the lid, taking a coin, and then moving on because I don't have time, which is essentially what I just did for the last 2 days with all of you. So ask you, Mechila. So I've shown you the treasure. Now, you have to unearth it yourself, but there is much to be discovered here. So we'll say back to the Mishnah. Yasum shashakt all about Petropsin. So we'll say, so remember again, the Mishnah said that if you have a yasum, you have an orphan, and let's say again, the orphan has multiple apotropsin, has multiple guardians or custodians. So remember again, what's the halacha? So the halacha is that if they went ahead and they shechted Karban Pesach for him, so the Gemara says, Yochal b'makom shehu rotzeh. He could eat from whatever Karban Pesach he wants. Okay, so the Gemara says, Shamis mina yesh breira. So we'll say, once again, what this sounds like is that two apotropsin both shecht on him, and he could choose whichever apotropis he wants, which sounds like, therefore, that there's breira, attractive clarification. We'll say, now the Gemara says, no, not necessarily. Yesh breira amar Zera se labayis mikomakom. Rabbi Zera says, no, there's a different din over here, I will say, which is, and now we're going to get into a very interesting sugya of selabayis. We'll say, selabayis means that when you are the head of a household, you have the ability to shech the Karban Pesach on behalf of the members of the household, even without their explicit consent, because there's implicit consent. So therefore, again, a yasum, a child, is a child, ultimately, again, is really under the stewardship of these apotropsin. They each consider him part of their bias, and therefore, ultimately, again, they are permitted to shecht on his behalf. So the Gemara says, let's analyze this. Tanar Rabbanan, Sela Bayis, Malame Shadam Maybe V'Shochet Ayidei Benobi to Aktanim, Va'ayidei Avdo V'Shivchasu Aknanim, Bein Midaiton, Bein Shalom Midaiton. So we'll say this is very important. Sela Bayis means you being the balabas, you shecht the Karban Pesach on behalf of the members of your household. See, Rabbi said this is very important. You don't need to go around to every single person in your home and say, you're part of the Chabura, you're part of the Chabura, you're part of the Chabura. Sela Bayis means that it's understood that the members of your household are part of your chabura. Now, who do the members of your household include? So the Gemara says it means your minor children. I don't mean minor children like the ones you like less. I mean like, your children who are minors, right? Your children who are minors. And also, again, your servants. Avado v'shechazo, your non-Jewish servants. So these are the members of your household whom you shecht Korban Pesach on their behalf, even without, you don't need, quote unquote, the articulation of consent. However, that's what it means, be'mi daitam and shalomi daitam. Whether they express their consent or don't express their consent. However, aval ino shochet al yedei beno bito hagidolim, vayde avdo v'shuchasa avriyim, vayde ishto elami daito. However, if you have adult children who maybe live in your house, or you have Jewish servants who live in your house, or you have a wife, these individuals only become part of your Korban Pesach if they explicitly articulate consent. So see here the distinction? So essentially, minors and non-Jewish servants are automatically part of your household, are automatically included as part of your Korban Pesach, even if they don't articulate a desire to do so. However, adult children, Jewish servants, and your wife and your spouse ultimately, again, need to articulate explicit consent in order to be part of your chabura. So Tanya, the Brisa that says, Lo yishchot adam lo yedei beno bitu hagidolim. So Brisa says, you can't shecht on behalf of your adult children, v'lo ayedei abdo v'shivchaso ha'ivriim, and not on behalf of your Jewish servants, v'al yad ishto, or your wife, ela midaiton, unless, of course, you have their explicit consent. Aval shochetu, al yedei beno ubito haktanim, va'al yedei shivchaso haknanim, aved v'shivchaso haknanim, be'mi daiton, bein shalomi daiton. But again, for your minor children or for your non-Jewish servants, you can go ahead and shecht on their behalf even without their consent. V'kulan sheshachtu v'shachat rabban aleihen yotzin b'shal rabban ve'en yotzin b'shal atzmon. But any of these individuals who did their own Korban Pesach and their master could either be master for the servants, husband for the wife, father for the children, also went ahead and did a Korban Pesach on their behalf. Yotzin b'shal rabban ve'en yotzin b'shal atzmon. They're yotze with the masters, but not with their own. Chutz mina isha, with the exception ultimately again of a wife. Because she could say, I did my own Korban Pesach, or as part of a different chabura, I'm not part of yours. So the Gemara says, Ma'ishna Isha, I don't understand, why are you singling out a wife? So you both say, beforehand we said that a wife, adult children, and Jewish servants all represented autonomous adults. And therefore, again, they're all one category. Here, why are you separating out a wife? So the Gemara says, Amarava Isha v'chol d'damila. No, what it means is a wife and anyone like her. That halacha l'maisa, so that's the wife, the adult children, the Jewish servants. Ultimately, if they decide they don't want to participate in the Balabas's Korban Pesach, they have the right to do so. So the Gemara says, Gufa kasha, but it's a contradiction. Amrit chutz mina Isha, shit yechol limchos. You said that with the exception of a wife, because she could object. She could say, I don't want to be part of my husband's Korban Pesach. So the Gemara says, Taimid demachi. Now the reason, apparently, why she would not be part of her husband's Korban Pesach is because she actively lodges an objection, halomach nafka b'shal baila, which seems to infer that if she doesn't object, then halacha l'maisa, she is yotze with her husband. V'hakatani reisha v'lo al yedei ishto ela midaitan. But then you said a husband could only include his wife if he has her explicit consent. So both say, see here the contradiction. So according to one part of the Brisa, it seems to indicate that in order for a wife to be included in her husband's Korban Pesach, she must give her active consent. I want to be part of this chabura. From the Seifa of the Brisa, it indicates that what? As long as what? As long as she doesn't object, she's part of her husband's chabura. It's a very significant nafkamina. So which one is it? So the Gemara says, my ela midaiton. What my ela midaiton? So what does it mean when the Brisa says that she only becomes part, or they only become part of the husband's, of the man's Korban Pesach midaiton? Lav da amri in. Ella bistama. It's not that they said, yes, we want to, rather bistama. So we'll say, what the Gemara is suggesting is something very important. That halacha l'maisa, a wife, we assume that she is part of her husband's Korban Pesach, unless, of course, what? Unless, of course, she goes out and she says, I don't want it, which we'll both say is a logical assumption. This goes back to yesterday's daf. It's the same way that if her father shechs on her behalf and her husband shechs on her behalf, again, assuming it's not the first Yom Tov after a marriage where they're at their father's house, whose Korban Pesach do we assume she's part of? Her husband. Now, does she have the right to object? Yes, of course. But in the absence of a clearly articulated objection, we have no reason to assume that she's part of any other chabura other than her husband's. So a wife does have the ability to object. When I say object, meaning she says, I don't want to be part of your chabura, I'll be part of someone else's chabura. But lamaisa, if she doesn't do so, the default is that she's part of her husband's chabura. La fuke heicha da amarlo. This comes to exclude a case where she says no. If she says no, I don't want to be part of your chabura, then ena chinam, she's not part of her husband's chabura. I v'hakulam sheshachtu v'shachat rabban alein yosef v'shal rabban dibistama. But yet, if you look at the end of the rights that we just read, when it said, any of these individuals, if they did the organ Korban Pesach, but the rabban, the master, also did a Korban Pesach, the yod say with the masters, dibistama vikatani chutz mina isha bipnei shiachola limchos. And it says with the exception of a wife, because she has the ability to object. To which the Gemara says, Amarava, kevan sheshachtu, once a wife shechts her own Korban Pesach, ein lecha michui gadol mizeh. There is no greater objection than this. So I will say, what comes out from this Gemara is something very interesting. So apparently, again, a wife, minor children, and non-Jewish servants are automatically included in, well, let me say it differently. Anyone living in the household of the balabas is automatically included in the Korban Pesach. Automatically included, right? Halacha l'maisa, there are certain people who really don't have, who are included perhaps even if they object, right? So for example, minor children, avadim kinanim, non-Jewish servants would be included in the Korban Pesach of the balabas, even if technically they object. Any household members are part of the balabas's Korban Pesach. Right? Now again, adult, independent, autonomous people have the ability to go ahead and latch themselves or connect themselves onto another chabura. So for example, a wife, adult children, Jewish servants, although if they don't say anything, are automatically included in the chabura of the household, halacha l'maisa have the right to choose a different chabura. So this is very important. So it tells us that in order to be part of a chabura, if you are a member of a household, you don't have to articulate your desire to be part of the chabura. You're automatically included. The default is, if you live in the house, you're included. But again, if you are an independent adult, you have the ability to remove yourself from the household chabura, attach yourself to a different chabura. So both say, the nafkamina would be in this, by the way, that let's say again, you have a good friend who you always have Pesach with. Someone who's not a member of your household, in order to be part of your chabura, must actively articulate acceptance as part of your chabura. In other words, that must be explicitly articulated. This idea of stama, of people automatically being included, really only applies to members of the household. Incredible. So the Gemara goes weiter. Eved shal shnei shutfin. So we'll say, so remember again, then the Mishnah spoke about the case of an Eved that belongs to two partners. So we'll say in that case, where each partner went ahead and shechted the Korban Pesach. So remember the Mishnah said that the Eved can't eat from either Pesach. So the Gemara says, Rami le Rav Ina Saba Rav Nachman. So Rav Ina Saba, he posed the question to Rav Nachman. Tanan, Evet shal shnei shutfin lo yochal mishnei shneihem. We learned in the Mishnah that an Evet that belongs to two partners can't eat from either Korban Pesach. Vatanya ratza mizeh ochel. Yet we have another brisa that says that the Evet could eat from either one. So which one is it? Amrlei ina saba v'amrlei pasio uchma. So he said to him literally again, my elder, or blackened pot. Now we'll say blackened pot was a compliment. Right? I mean, I don't know if you should use it, but Lamaisa, right? It's a compliment. We'll say, why is it a compliment? So blackened pot, when does a pot become blackened? If it's used a lot. So sometimes Talmidei Chachamim, when they would spend a lot of time in the base medrash, sometimes they would neglect their personal care. So they would become, so to speak, blackened. So that was a reference ultimately to someone who was so immersed in Torah that sometimes they neglected even their personal care. So Pasya Uchma, Mina Uminach this time so let's go ahead. Between me and you, we could work this out. The Gemara says, Mas nisin b'dekapti ahadadi braisidol kapti adadi. They both say everything depends on the relationship between the partners. The Mishnah is talking about a case where the partners don't get along. Therefore, neither partner is willing to yield his share in the Eved, and therefore, I will say, essentially, you have an Eved that can't fully be part of any one Chabura. However, the Brisa that says that the Eved could eat from either one, that's a case where the partners get along nicely, and they're willing to yield their share, so to speak, when it comes to Karban Pesach. Good. So when I say yield their share in the Eved, so that the Eved could fully participate in one of the Chaburas. So let's remember again, last case in the Mishnah. Someone who's half Eved, half free. This is Eved Kinani, right? Eved Kinani owned by two partners. One of the partners emancipated his chelik. So you literally have an individual who's half free and half Eved. So what does the Mishnah say? Lo yochal mishal rabo. This Eved also can't eat Karban Pesach. So remember again, so we'll say Reuven and Shimon own a slave jointly. So Reuven emancipates his chelik. Shimon's still holding on to his chelik. Shimon makes Karban Pesach. So the Eved can't eat. He can't eat Karban Pesach. Why? Because again, he's half Eved. Because remember again, he's half owned, half free. So both say, now watch this. It's actually quite fascinating. Right. So let's see. So the Gemara says as follows. The Gemara says, Mishal Rabbo hu delo yochal, aval Mishal atzmo yochal. So we'll see, interesting if the Gemara says, he can't eat of the Karban Pesach of his master, but if he wants to make his own Karban Pesach, he has the ability to do so. But it says, the Mishnah says, he can't eat his own Karban Pesach, he can't eat the Karban Pesach of his master. Sounds like he can't make his own Karban Pesach. I suppose this is incredible. Lo kasha, kan b'mishnah rishona, kan b'mishnah achrona. We'll say, our Mishnah is talking about the original view of Beis Hillel. The Brisa we just quoted is referring to the second, or the final view of Beis Hillel. What did Beis Hillel say? This is incredible. Disnan, Misha Chetziv Eved Chetziv Ben Chorin. Supposed to say someone who is a half Eved, half Ben Chorin, which is our case. You have an Eved Kinani owned by two partners. One partner emancipates his chelik. This individual now is half slave, half free man. So what's the halacha? Beis Hillel says, okay, if you're a Chatzi Eved Chatzi Ben Chorin, what does that mean? So I'll say what it means is Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, you are an Eved, you work for your master, and those alternate days, you work for yourself. That's what it means. So the Gemara says, Beis Shammai says, that's very nice. Amud Beis, Takantem es Rabbo es atzmo lo takantem. That's a nice solution for the master, but it's not a good solution for the individual. Why? Rabbo said, because again, this individual, this Chatzi Eved Chatzi Ben Chorin, is stuck. Why is he stuck? Lisa shivcha in yachol shekvar Chatzi Ben Chorin. He can't marry a slave woman. Why? Because half of him is emancipated. Lisa bas chorin in yachol. He also can't marry a free Jewish woman. Why? Shadain Chetzev Eved. Because there's still a half of him that's an Eved. Yibatel. So what? He should never get married, never have a family. V'halo lo nivra olam el lepir v'rivya. The world was only created for the purpose of trying to procreate. Trying, again, a person can't control what happens, but my avodah is to try. So therefore, again, this individual, is going to be condemned to a life of loneliness. It's interesting, I will say. I want to just point out over here how Chazal are focused on his relationship situation. It doesn't say, what is he going to do about mitzvahs? Right? What it's talking about is, you've stunted his ability to just have companionship. Right? You stunted his ability to get married, to have a life. It's incredible what Chazal understood to see. Because also, remember again, there's plenty of spiritual roadblocks for this individual. Also, what's his status lagabi mitzvahs? Right? Because remember again, Eved Kanani is only obligated in mitzvahs aseh shalo hazman grama, only non-time, non-commandments. Free man is obligated in all. But no, that's not what it is. The focus over here is, what are you going to do als companionship? Als companionship. He can't marry a shivcha. He can't marry a regular woman. So the Gemara says, we'll say, so essentially what the halacha is, Beis Shammai says, we do not allow a situation of Chatzi Eved Chatzi Ben Chorin to be sustained. Instead, what we do is we force the master to emancipate the remaining chelik. And we'll say, what happens? V'kosef shtar Chatzi damav. But we'll say, essentially what we do is, we make it an IOU. We tell the Eved, fine, we're going to force the master to free the remaining part, but you owe him then the loss, so to speak. You owe him the value of that part of the Eved that he just emancipated. And Beis Hillel is incredible. So we'll say it's fascinating to see that Beis Shammai is the more compassionate and empathic view over here, and Beis Hillel was not. So Beis Hillel ultimately, again, changes his view and ultimately aligns himself with Beis Shammai, which is another way, which also says another way of saying that we don't allow a case of Chatzi Eved, Chatzi Ben Chorin to endure. So when the Mishnah said a Chatzi Eved, Chatzi Ben Chorin can't eat his Karban Pesach or the Karban Pesach of his master, that's true. When the Brisa says he eats his own Karban Pesach, that's because essentially we force the master to emancipate him. We don't allow this situation ultimately to endure, and Beis Hillel came around to Beis Shammai Shita as well. Beautiful. Mishnah. Ha'omer li'avdo tzei v'shachot alayis ha'pesach. Suppose listen to this case. We've already established before that for Karban Pesach you can use a sheep or a goat. Either one is fine. So Omer la'avdo, a person says to his servant, "Say v'shachot alayis ha'pesach, do me a favor, go out and have the Karban Pesach shechted for me." Right? Go ahead and oversee, right? Oh, just have the Karban Pesach shechted for me. So what happens? Shachat gedi yochal, shachat tala yochal. So we'll say, so whether the servant chooses a gedi or a tala, so whether he chooses a goat or he chooses a sheep, either one is fine. In other words, the master didn't give him any explicit instructions, so whatever he does is totally fine. Shachat, so what happens? Gedi v'tala, what happens if the Eved shechted both for Karban Pesach? Yochal bin Arishon, whichever one he shechted first, that's going to be Karban Pesach. Fine. Shachat ma amar lo rabo. We'll say, let's say again, the master was specific. Let's say, for example, he told the Eved, I want a goat. And the Eved can't remember what the master told him. Did he tell me goat? Did he tell me a sheep? So what happened? So Shachat ma amar lo rabo. Ketzad yasa, what should he do? Yishchot tala gedi. He should shecht both. V'yomar, im gedi amrli rabbi gedi shalo v'tala shali. If my master said a gedi, then the gedi is his, and the tala is mine. V'im tala amrli rabbi, and if my master said a tala, then a tala shalo v'agdi shali. He shechts both with the t'nai, right? Whichever one my master wanted, that should be for him, and the other one should be for me. Shachach rabo ma amar. Listen to this case. Let's say the master told the Eved, I want a goat. And what happens now? The master ends up forgetting what everybody forgets in this case, right? The Eved forgot, the master forgot. So what happens? So the Gemara is ma'amarlo shneihen yetzu lebeis hasreifa. So we'll say in that case over here, you have to burn both the gedid, right, the goat and the lamb. Upitrom milasos pesach sheni. But we'll say, so interesting enough, we will discuss this. It doesn't work for the carbon. So we'll say the reason why it doesn't work is because you can't have a Karban Pesach if you're not sure which animal was shechted for the sake of Pesach. So when the master himself doesn't remember what he said, neither animal is fit for consumption of Karban Pesach. But yet, interestingly enough, we know one of the animals was a valid Karban Pesach. So because of that, interestingly enough, you can't eat it, but yet the master is not obligated in Pesach Sheni, because at the end of the day, he did bring a bona fide Karban Pesach. Interesting. So we'll explore each of these cases. So the Gemara says, Pshita. So we'll say, so focusing now on the first case, where the master says to the Eved, go out and shech the Karban Pesach for me, but the master doesn't tell the Eved what kind of animal. So the Mishnah therefore says, whatever the Eved used, he used the goat, he used the sheep, Yotze, it's good. He wants to say, that's obvious. Shachat gedi yochal, as the Gemara says. So no, here's the chiddush. That let's say this servant shechted a goat. Yochal afagav diragil betala. Shachat tala yochal afagav diragil begdi. So the Gemara says the chiddush is like this: that even let's say the master normally ate sheep, right? Let's say he normally ate sheep, but this case the servant went ahead and shechted a goat, or vice versa. It still works for Karban Pesach. So we'll say even though the normal preference of the master was for a different type of meat, whatever the servant used worked. Since the master was non-specific in his command, therefore again it's up to the discretion of the servant to use whichever type of animal, even though the master normally had a preference. The Gemara says, what happens if the servant shechted both the gedi and the tala? Ultimately, again, we use the first animal slaughtered. First animal slaughtered, that's Karban Pesach. But one second, we learned that halacha l'maisa, you can't go ahead and have two psachim. You can't shecht two karbanos. Look at Rashi about for just a moment. But Tanya ein nimden al shnei psachim ke'echad lechol b'shas achila me'echad mehen sheyirtze the ein breira. See, I say you can't shecht a sheep and a goat and say, you know what, I don't know what I'm going to be in the mood for Pesach night. So therefore, whatever I'm going to be in the mood for, I want to have both. You can't do that. There's one carbon Pesach per customer. So what does this mean that he's shechting both? So we'll say this is very interesting. Maslisin b'melech v'malka. The Mishnah is talking about a king and a queen. We'll say now what is this? And you look at Rashi. B'melech u'malka shetluyin alav dein ve'in makpidin al sudas l'din t'loim. A king and a queen are dependent on their servants. And the truth is, for Pesach purposes, the king and the queen, it doesn't matter to them whether it's going to be sheep or whether it's going to be goat. It doesn't make a difference. Because we'll say, remember again, for them, it's just about discharging the mitzvah. They have plenty of delicacies. Therefore, the Gemara says, Hilchach ein kan din breira ditarvaihu nechale lefichach yochal min arishon. So we'll say, breira means when we don't know which one you want, and therefore you have to rely on attractive clarification. Here, for the king and queen, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter if it's a goat or if it's a sheep. So therefore, again, all we look at is which one is shechted first. And whichever one is shechted first, that's the carbon Pesach. The Gemara says, listen to this. Umaisa b'melech umalka sha'amru. I'm sorry. V'atanya inina shnei pesachim ke'achad. Umaisa b'melech umalka sha'amru la'avdein. We'll say first wide line, just we'll do another minute. Tzu v'shachtu alinu asa pesach. So we'll say there was once a king and a queen who said to their servants, Jewish king and a queen, who said to their servants, go and shecht on our behalf for carbon Pesach. V'yatzu v'shachtu alinu shnei pesachim. And the servants went and shechted two animals, a goat and a sheep. So they said to the king, which one do you want to use? So the king was a very wise man. Amar lahem l'chu v'shalu hamalka. Why don't you ask the queen? Right? Whatever the queen wants, that's good. They came and they asked the queen. Amar lahem l'chu v'shalu Rabbi Gamliel. The queen said, go and ask Rabbi Gamliel. Whatever Rabbi Gamliel says we should use is what we will use. Amar lahem. So they came to ask Rabbi Gamliel. So Rabbi Gamliel said like this: so the king and the queen, interestingly enough, they're not makbid for carbon Pesach if it's a goat or if it's a sheep, because again they have delicacies all of the time. This is for the purpose of a mitzvah. This one thing doesn't matter to them, so therefore we say whichever one was shechted first, that's the carbon Pesach. Anan, however, Rabbi Gamliel says, Anan lo nochal no min harishon v'lo min hasheni. For us, Rabbi Gamliel said, however, for us meaning regular people, so we're more particular. But it's actually fascinating. So in this context, the king and the queen are not particular. Regular people are particular. Because regular people are particular, that's when you'd have to rely on the concept of breira, retroactive clarification, and we don't rely on breira. Therefore, both in a case where you shechted two animals for carbon Pesach, ultimately, again, neither would work. The halacha l'maaseh you could not partake of either, because that would be a case of shechting two animals for Pesach consumption, which is usher. So for the melech or malka, whichever one they shechted first is good. For regular people, both would be invalid for consumption of carbon Pesach. So we have to stop over here. We'll pick up here. There's more to this Rabbi Gamliel's story tomorrow. We'll pick up here tomorrow.
First, I don't know if you know Rich the Hurley.
Give me 1 second, it's still recording.